What do you think? What's the secret to a lasting marriage?
Luck.
I would say food.
Having lots of fun together.
Being able to communicate, negotiate.
Communication and dating.
Lots of money and good sex.
That too.
You need some intellectual companionship, fluttering of the heart, tingling of the spine.
Understanding and compromise.
Good communication.
Communication.
Yeah, I would say communication.
Understanding each other's point of view.
The secret is the communication.
I think communication is key, dude.
Talking, communicating.
I mean, it's a big mystery, actually.
Definitely good romance.
If you don't communicate, you don't know what the other thinks.
You can't think about what each other are thinking. You have to talk to each other.
When you don't know that, it's the beginning of the problem.
We all have a deep desire for a close connection with another person. This is one of our most fundamental human needs. But a close connection in marriage will only be achieved where there's good communication. Nikki and I had been dating for about 5 months when he went away traveling, backpacking in Africa, while I had to stay in the UK and finish my school exams. And this was in the days well before mobile phones and the internet. So we had to write letters to each other all through that time to stay connected. And even though we were apart for 6 months, it was an incredibly important part of our growing closer. We learnt so much about each other as we shared our innermost thoughts, our ideas, our dreams, and especially our feelings in those letters.
The strange thing was, when we were both back in the same country but in different cities, Scylla was in London, I was at university in another city, we really struggled in our communication as we had to rely on public phones.
So I was sharing a house with 3 other girls, and the phone was right at the bottom of the stairs. And there was this steady traffic of people going up and down, overhearing everything I said every time I rang Nikki. And I knew Nikki was longing to hear me say all kinds of intimate things, like I loved him, I was missing him. But that would have been far too embarrassing to say out loud with everybody going up and down.
I, meanwhile, was speaking from a public phone box in the street, and I was having to shove money into the box with this queue of other students forming outside and occasionally tapping their money on the glass if they thought that I was going on too long, which wasn't ideal while I was trying to have this romantic conversation with Scylla, telling her how much I loved her, and only getting quite perfunctory answers from her.
So we regularly ended up those conversations with either one or both of us feeling misunderstood, upset, and disconnected. And learning to communicate effectively is something Nikki and I have had to learn ourselves and go on learning throughout our marriage in order to stay closely connected.
Take 7.
Phones have really changed the dynamic of how you interact because they're around all the time.
I would say if there's one area where bickering continues, it's via text message. Like text message bickering is the worst bickering because it's so easy to misinterpret what someone else is saying. Like the other day, I was late. I was late coming home from work. I was in the back of the car.
He gave me the ETA.
I gave him the ETA
estimated time of arrival
before we hit traffic, and I think it was 6:15 or 7:15 or whatever time it was.
It was 6:12.
Yeah.
And at 6:15, he's still not home.
Yeah. So she texted. Well, the text message was, "You should have told me you were late, and I should have gotten the text at 6:12." Right? Like
6:11.
6:11.
When you were gonna miss it.
I think the problem with text messages is you don't understand the context the other person is in when they're sending it, and you don't understand the context the other person is in when they're receiving it. So you have no idea.
I have screaming kids. I'm exhausted. He was supposed to be home early. You know, you're really both pulling your hair out, but you can't see the other person. And I do think that that screen of technology where you can't see the other person and you don't know what they're going through is very hard to not be mean on text.
Out of that, I've sort of now put in my frame of reference, if I can't end the text message without a kissy face emoji, I probably should not be sending it to my wife.
Close connection in marriage has a lot to do with the level at which we communicate with each other. There are broadly 3 levels. Level 1 communication is about facts, passing on information at a superficial level, such as it's raining, the train's late, we've gone into overdraft. That creates a weak connection.
Level 2 is a deeper level of communication and stronger connection. and represents sharing our ideas, our opinions. For example, I think the government should do more to protect the environment. Or, I think you should look for a better paid job. Or, I think we should spend time at home with the children this weekend instead of going away. Level 3 is the deepest level of communication. This is around our emotions, our feelings. When we say, I felt hurt by what your mother said yesterday. Or, it meant so much to me when you spent time listening to me about that difficult time at work. Or, I'm feeling frightened that we're not going to be able to pay off our debt. Or, I need you to tell me that I'm doing okay.
And that's when we're talking about what's going on inside us, when we're talking about our deepest needs. And that takes a degree of vulnerability and trust. We don't communicate at that level with just anyone. But it's essential we communicate like this with our partner, because that's how we build good connection and deep intimacy.
My wife Dan and I have been married a long time. It seems an awfully long time. The truth is, it's getting on a half a century. You can't be married that long without going through tough times. And we've been through tough times. I think we've been through times where it seemed that it was all over. I remember some years ago, the kids were small, I was busy in the law practice, and Dan said to me one day, darling, I'm not sure we're going to make it. And it was an incredible shock to me. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you're so busy, we don't have time even to talk together. And see, sometimes when we live busy lives, we say yes to the whole world, but no to those for whom we have primary responsibility. And I remember cancelling engagement after engagement, and we spent long winter evenings in front of a fire talking. We talked about me being just too busy. We talked about our sexual relationship. We talked about money. And it was jolly hard work. But as we talked, we began to warm towards each other and understand each other. And it wasn't just words. Diane would say to me often, when you do that, it's how I feel. And it was like a light bulb going on in my mind, but I well remember those winter evenings.
Of course, communication is two-way. Effective communication is always dynamic. It involves talking and listening. It requires a response from the other person. There's an ongoing flow and interchange. And in marriage, our aim has to be to listen twice as much as we talk.
And communication that's deep and personal is multi-layered. It's not just about words. It involves the warmth of our voice. It involves our gestures. It involves how and when we touch each other. For example, putting an arm around our partner when they're upset. And it involves our body language. Facing our partner when they're telling us something important and looking them in the eye show we're interested in and listening to what they're saying. When we combine this responsive body language, an engaging tone of voice, and talking about our thoughts and feelings, we create deep connection with our partner. We all have that longing deep inside us to be known by another person, to be heard and understood. But that's not automatic in a marriage. An article in a Sunday newspaper described the breakup of a celebrity marriage, and it quoted the husband as saying, "When we went to marriage counselling, I was shocked to find we'd never really talked. I heard my wife telling a complete stranger about feelings I never knew existed, and I heard myself doing the same. We could only communicate through a stranger." Two people can be living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, yet if they don't communicate at the level of their feelings, they can be like strangers towards each other.
We've been married for 20 years.
No, it's more than 20 years, isn't it?
Coming up to 22 years. And we have 3 children and a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was in the police for 15 years. That's where we met.
Yeah, I joined a department called SCD-10, where I became an undercover police officer. I wouldn't talk about my work at all. So I thought the way to deal with my family was to protect Liz from all the stuff I would see, the murder scenes I'd go to. So when I got home and Liz said, "How's your day?" I'd go, "Yeah, fine."
This is when it all started to unravel. And we went on like this, not communicating at all, really. But it was all simmering underneath.
this lack of communication and lack of understanding of each other.
And so the pressures of work, the pressures of my lifestyle, the pressures of our marriage status, we were just about to explode. And then, following the death of my sister and different stuff, my heart went in spasm and having a heart attack and got taken into hospital. And the one good thing that I was ever any good at was being a policeman, and I couldn't do it anymore, and it crushed me. That's when we decided in St George's Hospital, Tooting, to firm up our separation. And we separated. I moved in with my mum and dad, and Liz stayed in the family home opposite her mum and dad. And I hit rock bottom. Couldn't even breathe. Contemplating ended it all. Liz came round and knocked on the door and said, I still love the man I married, and I'm here until you find yourself again. And from that moment, we started falling in love again.
We learnt through that time that we really needed to work on our marriage.
I think it's been a process of us learning how to communicate deeply, not on the surface level. It's actually that dedicated time to being present that really changed. I think it was gradual, but I think it was putting space in the diary and making sure that we kept on doing it.
Quite often, even now, we find ourselves saying, just stopping for a moment and saying, we don't feel we've connected for a few days. We need to connect, and we can recognise now that we're starting to go off, and we just need to. It doesn't take much. We just need to regroup and come back together.
Every couple has to work out how to stay connected on a daily basis, in whatever way works for them, whether that's through talking as they travel to work together, communicating by text, talking on the phone during the day, or catching up when they get home in the evening.
Now, we're not saying this always has to be deep emotional stuff. And for some people, if they know that whenever their partner wants to talk, it's going to be intense, they'll avoid conversation.
But unless we tell each other what's going on in our lives and what's uppermost in our minds, we can so quickly drift apart. It's only when another person understands us that they're really with us. Effective communication draws us together at an emotional level.
We want you to turn in your journal to the first conversation, a significant memory. Spend 1 minute telling your partner about a happy or some other special memory, something that happened to you before you met each other.
And as you're talking, be sure to express what you felt as you recall this memory. Don't just describe the facts.
Then your partner should say back what they've just heard. And not just the information in a factual way, but reflecting the feelings that they've heard to show they've understood why it was so special for you. Then swap roles. We want to look now at the importance of talking in particular. I wonder if you've ever stopped to consider what you talk about most of the time. When Stella and I are busy and under pressure, we find we can easily slip into talking only about the mundane, practical details of life. For example, who needs the car that day, or what time we need to leave to get somewhere, or what shopping we need.
And that's why date night is so important. This quality time that we've scheduled in when we can talk at a deeper level. And I only really feel connected to Nikki when we've had time to share our feelings with each other.
But some of you may be like me and find talking about feelings doesn't come naturally to you. And that could be for a variety of reasons. For some people, their culture doesn't encourage them to talk about their own individual needs and longings, or perhaps they never learned to talk about their opinions and feelings as they were growing up. Or they may have been taught to hide them.
I grew up in a home where there are no feelings, there are facts. right? This happened or it did
That
not
is very
happen.
true.
It is black and white. But you get married and you don't realize that your spouse can look at the same set of facts and perceive them very, very differently and have a set of emotions.
Or feel differently about them.
And I had no vocabulary whatsoever to deal with feelings at all.
Yeah, I mean, we actually did get help in our second year of marriage around feelings and conflict resolution because he hadn't really realized a lot of feeling words. I think that's fair to say that you had to really almost kind of go through the list of words like, am I anxious? Am I fearful? Am I tired? Am I sad?
I printed out a sheet of feelings words and it was like, let's go through the list of feelings words. Are you feeling this? Are you feeling this? What does this mean? And it was a whole realm of relationship that I had never realized existed before.
I think I'm quite in tune with how I feel.
And you have an excellent vocabulary.
And I have a pretty good vocabulary. And so I have to be a lot more explicit than I would be with a girlfriend. Like, I have to talk to you about my feelings. You know, I wouldn't say that to a girlfriend. I would just say to a girlfriend, oh, I was really frustrated about what happened. And they would just kind of automatically jump into, you must have felt so annoyed, or you must have been so frustrated. And with him, I'm like, I'm going to talk to you now about feelings. And you need to listen to them. I remember wanting him to come in and know I was upset. He did not have a clue. I mean, I would be like, I haven't talked to you. I'm upset. Well, that's not helpful. Now I say, I'm upset. You know, he can't read my mind.
Flagging and being overt, I think, has helped us at least about, I really have a problem here and I need to resolve it.
We've created a diagram that lists some other reasons why people find it difficult to express their feelings. Some think, I don't want to disturb the peace by saying what I really feel. Or they may think it's just too complicated, or I may be misunderstood. Being on this course is about being in a safe place, a good place to overcome these barriers and to practice expressing your thoughts and feelings to your partner.
But some people don't just find it difficult to express their feelings, they also find it hard to recognize what they're feeling in the first place. And if that's you, we want to encourage you that change is possible. In one of the continuing conversations following this session in your journal, we've created an exercise for those who find it hard to identify their emotions. It's designed to help you recognize what you're feeling at different times and in different situations throughout the day.
It will take courage to begin to articulate these feelings to your partner if you're not used to communicating at this level. But we know many people who've changed dramatically and marriages that have become much closer as they've persisted.
We have some friends called Nick and Alison who 25 years ago separated and whose story is just that.
I remember it was just so easy for us to get into this place where we were saying a lot but not really communicating.
I think I began to confide in my sisters and close friends rather than in my husband. This began subtly at first to drive a wedge between us.
Yeah, our marriage collapsed because we failed to share our real feelings with one another. We came pretty much as close to divorce as it's possible to get.
Yeah, and if you asked us what went wrong, I think we'd both have agreed it was our failure to communicate effectively with each other.
Yeah, it's a long story. But after a pretty amazing turn of events, things turned around and we made our minds up to give our marriage another chance. And today we are back together with, I think, a deeper understanding of what it takes to stay connected.
When we got back together, I resolved not to have a thought life which was secret from Nick. In the past, I used to dwell on the negative aspects of our relationship, but rarely voiced my feelings. It was like I was setting up a case against him without allowing him to defend himself. We've become much better at recognizing when one of us is like brooding over something, and we persistently ask questions to get things out into the open. I tend to have more dramatic mood swings than Nick, and if I'm rather low, I find conversation difficult because I tend to shut down emotionally. And we have to work much harder during these times to keep real communication going.
Nick said to us, all current wisdom on this subject stresses the importance of quality time being carved out of hectic schedules. But this, in my experience, only marks out the space. Effective communication must mean revealing all parts of our lives. In my case, the parts that I'm well practiced at keeping hidden. For me, at least, it requires more than time. It requires courage.
So if you're married to someone who struggles to verbalize their feelings, they're likely to feel exposed and vulnerable when they first start to do so. So be sure to help them to feel safe, to open up. They need to know that you're not going to get angry and reject or blame them for what they reveal. Asking questions encourages them to say what they're feeling inside.
My name is Sally. I originally come from Egypt.
I'm Sammy. My family were originally Egyptians. We were living in Sudan.
I've met Sammy when I was 14 and he was a bit older.
She was so attracting, her personality, in terms of just being herself, simple, not complicated, which I like that from day one.
One of the things that would really hurt me is when Sammy says, you always do such and such. When those little hurting things happen, I found that over the years as well, that it takes maybe an outing together or when we're having a walk and then we discuss it. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes I find I'd rather not talk about it. But then when you encourage me, when you feel something is wrong and you encourage me to say it, I get to say it. But sometimes I need that encouragement because I'd rather not say it again. And I want you kind to find out by yourself. But it's only through you trying to let me say what's wrong.
When we go through tough time, it brings the best out of us. We learned that life, we are for each other and we need to support each other and learn from each other.
And that actually brought us so closer to each other.
For this next conversation, please take a few minutes to look together at the diagram in your journal, Barriers to Talking, and tell each other if any of those barriers apply to you.
All those thoughts in the diagram apply to me at different moments. And it takes courage for me to tell Scylla what I'm feeling inside. For effective communication, talking is vital. But so too is listening. Often we take listening for granted. And maybe that's because we're not able to close our ears in the same way we can close our mouth to stop us speaking or close our eyes to prevent us from seeing. But we can become highly selective in what and to whom we listen. And if we don't listen to our partner, they may well shut down. They'll probably stop talking to us about their thoughts and feelings.
And we've discovered that listening is one of the most important skills to learn if we're to have a strong marriage. And I have certainly had to learn a lot over the years because I'm not a naturally good listener. There's a great quote from the Bible that says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And I have to remind myself of that often. And actually it also reminds me of a well-known helpline service in the UK that had an advertising poster of just a huge ear with the words written across it, open 24 hours. And they know that they can give support, sometimes life-changing support, just through listening.
The amazing thing about marriage is that we have it in our power to make our partner feel loved and valued just by listening to them. This is one of the greatest gifts we can give to our partner and to our marriage. But often, it's the people we're closest to that we can find it hardest to listen to. It's so easy to stop listening to our partner or cut them off because we think, I already know what they're going to say next, and we short-circuit the conversation, sometimes just to speed things up. But the effect is, we can stop our partner saying what they're thinking or feeling.
I'm Tony Troxler.
I'm Susie Troxler, obviously.
And we've been married for about, 12 years now? Without listening to something and just prejudging or giving advice as soon as I hear a keyword or something. You have to hear the whole thing. You have to get the whole train of thought. I would just that, judge something after you said it, but I could be wrong. And I've gotten a lot better at just listening, hearing her out, and saying my part instead of just judging soon as she says something and trying to shut it down or speak over her. And it just feels a lot better not to do that.
If I feel like he's judging, to be able to say, I'm feeling like you're not listening, or and then he'll say, okay, right, okay, I'm listening. And then so it's just being honest just helps it work like it's supposed to. And in his defense, I'm not actually surprised that he would interrupt or disengage because I was very long-winded.
I was being polite.
Yeah, very long-winded. Like, I would be talking a long, long time. I had to learn that right along with him learning, not to disengage, or I had to learn to, break that down and just, smaller tablets, because it's just too many words.
So that's how we, I guess, learn to deal with it.
Yeah.
When they haven't been listened to, people talk about feeling frustrated, unsupported, and taken for granted. And some people would go as far as to say they feel unloved or even rejected. Knowing we've been listened to is the complete opposite. We're likely to feel valued, more confident, supported, and loved. And when I know that Nikki has really listened to me, I feel less stressed, I feel less anxious about life in general. In fact, it makes me feel really good.
We want you to take a few minutes thinking about the effect of being a good listener. Please look at the questions in the next conversation, The Power of Listening, and tell your partner how you would answer them. We're going to talk now about some of the things that can get in the way of us being good listeners. It may be we didn't have a model growing up or never experienced being listened to ourselves. Or it may be we were regularly ignored or criticized and put down, so we instinctively jump into justifying or defending ourselves. And it's become a habit.
And most of us have got into some bad listening habits for a variety of reasons. And often these habits have become an automatic response and we're not even aware of them. The trouble is, they can stop us communicating and connecting effectively with each other at a deep level.
So, we want to look at 5 bad listening habits. And it's worth recognizing that most of us will fall into at least one of these.
Well, some of us fall into a lot more. That's me. I have to be working on at least 3 most of the time.
So, the first bad listening habit is disengaging. Sometimes we disengage from what our partner is saying because there's a separate conversation going on in our heads which distracts us. Maybe that's because what they're saying triggers a memory of our own, and as we recall this memory, we can become distracted and stop listening to what's being said.
I remember a conversation I was having with Nikki about our daughter Kirsty when she was expecting her first baby, and she and her husband had to move house before the baby was going to be born. And Nikki was suggesting that we went to help them move and how long were we going to be there. And I suddenly realized I hadn't heard a thing he was saying because I've gone off into this world all of my own. And I was thinking about when I was pregnant with Kirsty and we had to do exactly the same. We had to move house too. So my own vivid memories that came flooding back had stopped me hearing what he was saying. And I had to ask him to tell me what he wanted to discuss all over again.
So it may be a memory like that which causes us to disengage, or it may be our physical environment. For example, if one of you is sitting in front of the computer and your partner comes into the room to talk to you, it can be very difficult to concentrate on what they're saying. For others of us, if we're in a room with a TV on, we're constantly distracted by what's on the screen. And with the streaming of information today, we're very used to filtering out what we think is interesting from what is not. So we may find ourselves disengaging through a lack of interest in what may be important to our partner.
And it takes generosity to listen to and be interested in each other's world, especially if we're involved in quite different activities or jobs.
But deciding to show interest will positively affect the way we listen. And this can be as simple as asking a question. Some of the best marriage advice we've heard was ask questions, ask questions, ask questions.
The second bad habit is reassuring. For example, we're talking to our husband or wife about something we're finding difficult, and a reassurer will come in with something like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. What you really need is a good night's sleep." Or, "It's not that bad, really, compared with what happened to Tom." And often the reassurer wants to be cheerful and positive about everything.
But when we do this, it doesn't allow our partner to express any kind of disappointment, hurt, worry, sadness, or any other negative feelings. And that can have the effect of shutting them down. Now, reassuring is definitely my worst listening habit. I want to keep everything calm. I want to cheer the other person up. But I've come to realize it doesn't help our marriage or our children if I don't let other people voice any negative emotions.
The third bad habit is giving advice. An advice giver always wants to give a solution to the problem. But the trouble is that the speaker, more often than not, just wants to be heard and understood, not fixed.
我叫严仁波，这是我的妻子啊，刘露。我们今年结婚18年了，她很活泼啊，也很年轻漂亮，非常的吸引我。
我啊，因为当时他很高大，他身材一直是这样比较壮的，哇！我当时看这个男生好 man。因为我们原来都是急于表达的人，我一说什么事情，人们会给到建议。
因为原来我也是，就是不太，就是在聆听方面啊，不太专注，有很多习惯，而且直接容易给意见啊。当听到一半的时候，我就想啊，就容易打断，然后呢，你应该怎么样，然后你应该然后就要给他意见，给了意见以后，完了以后我就想 over 了，应该可以结束了。
但可能那不是我要的。我要的只是同理感受，只要他及时的安慰我、抱抱我。每次他这样用眼神来鼓励到我，然后呢很耐心的听，其实真的会很被看到，很被尊重。对。
The fourth bad habit is going off on a tangent. You're telling someone about something that happened to you, but before you get to the best bit, they say, "Oh, that's just like what happened to me last week." Or, "Oh, that reminds me of when I was 19 and went away traveling." And away they go on their own agenda. And you never get the chance to finish your story. They've totally hijacked the conversation.
And the fifth and probably most common bad habit is interrupting. If you're talking to an interrupter, you can't afford to draw breath or pause to think.
Yeah, totally.
If you do, they're in there and you've lost your chance.
One man we know who admits he's a serial interrupter said to us, "I thought other people's conversation was something to be endured until I could start talking again."
So in conclusion, all 5 of these habits prevent the speaker from saying what they're feeling. And if that goes on happening, the speaker then starts to shut down and give up and say to themselves, what's the point of trying to communicate? So it's worth asking ourselves, do I have one or more of these bad habits?
So we went to school together. So I'm a couple of years older than Rach is, and you found me really attractive really quickly.
Not quite.
We lived in a small town, so basically when she got to 18, she realised she didn't have many choices, and I was the best of a bad bunch, basically.
That's not true. You were a very good choice.
Because you think faster than I think, a lot of the time you think you've figured out what I'm about to say before I've said it, so then you'll just interrupt me and presume what I've said, which most of the time is really right, which is really frustrating.
I remember you bringing that up with me and just saying, actually, even though you might be right and know what I'm going to say, it kind of isn't very valuing. Like, it's valuing to listen to someone, to let someone speak. And so sometimes I would often find Andy he could go off on a big tangent, or he'd take quite a long time to say something. And you've got better at shortening stories. So even when we're with friends, or I'd be like, Andy, tell the short story, because he just goes
like
through
a long story.
And it just takes forever. So I'd interject and just shut you off.
Interject feels like a justified way of saying interrupt.
Interrupt. I'd interrupt you and just kind of shut you off. And I think you learn, okay, I need to say things a little bit quicker, a little bit more succinct. and I try and give him a bit of space to let him finish, which takes self-control.
We're going to give you a few minutes now to identify what your particular bad habits are. So we want you to turn to the conversation in your journal, Identifying Bad Habits.
And if you're finding it difficult to identify yours, you could check with your partner. They may have a better idea.
It's only when we recognize our bad habits that we can then start to change. We can all learn the art of effective listening, but it takes time and it requires us to be intentional. And the best training ground is marriage itself, because it gives us plenty of opportunity for practice. And our partner can help us by letting us know when we fall into our worst habits.
And Scylla has certainly helped me to let others express negative emotions and to be better myself at expressing what I'm feeling.
And Nikki is really helpful for me by telling me when I've interrupted someone or him, as I've often been totally unaware when I've cut people off.
In a moment, Scylla and I are going to have a conversation in front of you. Scylla's going to tell me about an issue she's feeling concerned about, and I have no idea what it is. So this conversation is completely unrehearsed. My role is to try to model how to listen effectively. But before we do that, we'll run through 5 steps for what's called reflective listening. Reflective listening is based on a lot of research, and that's what I'm going to try and use.
So the first step is to try to put yourself in your partner's shoes. Our partner may be struggling to express themselves. They may not be used to doing so, or they may only be just working out their feelings as they talk. So don't rush them, and don't be afraid of silences. We're trying to understand their perspective.
The second step is to acknowledge what they've said. When you've listened to what your partner wants to say, reflect back what they've said to you. Reflecting back means saying back to them the main points you've heard, including any feelings they've expressed. Now, at this stage, you're not agreeing or disagreeing or giving your own opinion. Your turn to do that will come later. Reflecting back has 2 benefits. First of all, it helps us find out if we've really understood what our partner has told us. And secondly, it helps them know if they've been understood. Now, it'll probably feel awkward or contrived when you first do it, and it certainly did for me. I had to resist saying what I thought while Scylla was speaking. I had to restrain myself from wanting to give my side of the story. But we know now from our own experience that reflecting back makes a big difference when we show our partner we've understood what they've said, and it can make a big impact on our relationship.
The third step is to ask your partner, what's the most important part of what you've been saying? This helps them to focus, and people often talk around an issue that matters a lot to them. So wait quietly while they think about what they want to say. And then when they've spoken, reflect back again what you've heard. So often we think that being a good conversationalist is all about having an interesting view or a fascinating story to tell. But asking the right questions is what enables deep conversation.
And then the 4th step is help them work out what they might do. Ask them, what would you like to do, or perhaps like me or like us to do, about what you've just said? And rather than giving advice or telling our partner what we think they should do, it's 100 times more powerful if we draw out their ideas of what they'd like to do about the situation. Now, maybe they don't need to do anything. Sometimes talking it out is enough.
And then the 5th step is to ask a final question. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Now, don't assume you know everything. Give your partner time and space to talk about the issue that they've raised.
In a moment, we're going to get you to practice those 5 steps. But first, we're going to try to give you an example of what effective listening looks like and sounds like. To remind us whose issue is being discussed, the person who's speaking holds something. We'll use this paper table napkin, so Scylla gets to hold it as it's her issue we're focusing on. My role is to listen and respond appropriately. So, here goes. So, my darling, what would you like to talk about?
Well, just before I start talking, I just need to say to everybody out there to give them a bit of context about the issue I'm going to bring up. In a few months' time, Nikki and I are actually going to be moving out of the house that we have lived in for 34 years, where our children all grew up in from when they were very little, and we are downsizing. So that just gives you a context for the issue. So the thing that I just really wanted to talk to you about is us moving. And it's really, I've realised I've been kind of worrying around the difference between you and me when it comes to the whole thing. So you, with your over-optimism, think it's all going to happen just like that. And me, being much more of the realist, I kind of am thinking, actually, he hasn't a clue, because there's really a lot to do. Like, we've lived in this house for 34 years, and we're downsizing. So clearing it up and moving. It's not just a question of the movers coming, filling the van and moving it. We have got to do a lot of decision making, giving stuff away, throwing stuff away, and all of that. And I just feel your over-optimism and my realism are really in contention. And there are two things. I just feel stressed by your over-optimism because you're not taking into account the reality. But the other thing is, I feel when we've had conversations, your sort of over-optimism slightly is dismissive of my realism. And that's what I feel. I feel you don't really see it from my perspective in a kind of positive way. It's just like that mine is always a kind of, oh, yes, but. So I feel a bit sort of like dismissed, and that you don't really think that mine is a kind of genuine position to hold. So yours is the position that's really the kind of one that matters, and mine is just to, okay, she'll come round to my perspective in a minute.
So, let me see if I've understood. It's to do with moving out of our house that we've lived in for the last 34 years, and you're worried because I tend to be very over-optimistic about being able to get everything done, whereas you're much more realistic about the amount of clearing up we need to do, stuff we need to throw away or give away or whatever it is. And you said you were concerned that I tend to sort of slightly dismiss your realism because I'm so over-optimistic. I sort of dismiss it whenever you bring up about being worried about the amount of time it's going to take and what it's going to involve. So, is that right?
Yes,
right?
And also that I feel stressed.
Yes.
The more you don't sort of give recognition to it, it makes me feel more stressed because I think he hasn't a clue what it's going to take to get this house moved.
So you're feeling stressed because you think I don't have a clue of what it involves. Yeah. So what's the most important part of what you're saying?
Well, I think it's because I feel I'm always on the negative side. Yours is the positive side because you're over-optimistic. So wherever I'm coming from always seems to be like the negative side, and I feel I'm always on the defensive. And I think that's at the heart of it because, I'm not on the defensive. I'm excited, but I feel my position always seems to be a negative one, undermining yours, which is more optimistic. But I know as a realist, there's going to be a lot to do. So I think that's right at the heart of it.
So the most important part of it is you feel dismissed. You feel your perspective is dismissed because mine is the sort of more positive, optimistic side. You feel like yours is more negative because you're more realistic.
And I feel I'm always on the defensive.
Yes. So you feel on the defensive, yeah. So what would you like to do, or perhaps like me to do, or like us to do about what you've just said?
I think it's us. I think what we've got to do, which we really haven't done, is to do some planning. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think we've got to put some dates in our calendar because I think you think, oh, well, we're just a couple of Saturdays and it'll be sorted. I think it needs planning to take some time off work, and we've got to think seriously about, what furniture we've got to give away and what stuff we've got to chuck away. We need to do some lists. We need to do some planning in the calendar to get it just into action, and we haven't got very long.
So what you'd like to do is for us to sit down with our calendars and to plan in some time, and whereas I think it'll take a couple of Saturdays and we'll get it sorted,
yeah.
We need time. We need to take time off work in order to be able to work out what we give away, what we throw away,
exactly.
and what we keep.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I just don't want you to feel that I am not excited about it, feeling negative about it, or I don't want to be stressed about it. So that's why it's been so helpful to talk, because I want you to know I'm really positive and I do want to be optimistic, but I think it needs some practical, realistic planning and talking a bit more about it together.
So you don't want me to think you're not excited about moving and the future and so on, yeah. But having this sort of conversation and then planning what we do helps you not to feel stressed and me to be more realistic. Is that it?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we'll have a go.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Well, what you've heard is half the conversation. I'll have a chance to have my say later, and Scylla will listen to me.
And every time we have a conversation like that, even though it might have sounded rather artificial, it is always so helpful, as I know that Nikki has listened and understood more of what I'm feeling.
So now it's your opportunity. Please turn to the conversation, reflective listening. One of you take an issue that's upsetting or bothering you that you haven't discussed recently. And our suggestion for this conversation is not to choose an issue that's already causing a lot of conflict or disagreement. And follow the guidelines in the journal with the speaker holding something, a table napkin or a pen or something else, and the listener asking those questions and then reflecting back what they've heard. Then switch roles so that each of you has an opportunity to speak and to listen.
Doing that conversation for some of you may have been really difficult. You found it hard just to listen, like I do. If the issue you talked about is contentious, you'll both feel strongly that you want to get your points across. And it's really important that you each have a chance to talk and to be listened to about the same issue. So we get to hear how it is from our partner's perspective as well.
Again, this type of reflective listening may well feel very contrived, but our encouragement is to go on practicing at home. Now, we're not suggesting that you reflect back everything your partner says to you, otherwise you'll drive them mad. So if they ask you for a cup of coffee, you don't need to say, "You've just asked me for a cup of coffee." Just make the coffee. But when there's an issue that's emotional or contentious or has been unresolved for a long time, then this technique is very helpful. It's a very powerful tool. And couples have said to us that as they practice using it, it's become more natural and even automatic.
Now, while some of you found it hard to stop talking, others may have found it difficult to articulate your feelings. But if we fail to communicate what may be painful or complex emotions and try to cope on our own, we can all too easily start to drift apart. When we have the courage to be open about our inner selves and make ourselves vulnerable to each other, it builds trust and deep connection.
In your journal, one of the continuing conversations is called "How Good Is Your Communication?" And it has two purposes. First, to help you identify those areas you're good at talking about and those you're not so good at talking about or tend to avoid. Then secondly, for you to take an area you're not so good at talking about and use this same technique of reflective listening you've been using during this session.
Many people have talked to us about the need to relearn the art of conversation as a couple. Now, If we're to do that, it's essential that we spend quality time together on a regular basis. And that's why, for Nikki and me, our weekly date night is so important. It provides a regular opportunity to communicate at a deeper level than normal while we're relaxing together.
We're going to finish this session on communication with a short prayer. Please stay just as you are while we pray. Lord, thank you that you're a God who communicates with us. Thank you that we can pour out our hearts to you and that you're always listening to us.
Please help each couple to be good at expressing their feelings and listening to each other so that they might deepen their understanding and support for one another. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. It's been great having you with us for this session, and we look forward to you joining us for the next.
SCO5, take 1. Rachel
Andrew.
And Andy.
Okay, well.
I'll take this with me.
Mark.
Do we look relaxed? Or does it?
No, married. Date nights.
Yeah.
Date nights, yeah.
So I need to say it again now.
It was really important to me that.
What?
I'm so sorry.
That was gold. That was gold.
Parents,
I'm so sorry.
you've got to because if I say it.
Unflip. There we go.
Okay, just go for it.
Sorry.
Oh,